Assalamu alaikum, you're watching Views and News and I'm Faisal Rehman live from our Islamabad studios. Today we'll be talking about this State Bank of Pakistan's third quarterly report that was issued. Some very interesting facts which I want you to go through. There's a lot which has been told in this particular report. Now, it says fiscal deficit further has gone down, the current account gap relatively improved. Consumer price index inflation averaging at 6.8% in the last 9 months of the fiscal year 19 also exceeded its 6.0% target for the current fiscal year. Then further adds that the economic slowdown along with specific import compression measures led to sizable contraction in the country's import bill, despite the higher prices obviously. Improvement in trade deficit coupled with healthy growth in workers' remittances resulted in reduction in current account deficit from US 3.6, that's 13.6 billion in July to March fiscal year 18 to US 10.3 billion in July to March fiscal year 19. Despite several rounds of policy rate hike, inflation has rather stubbornly kept an upward trajectory. If you remember, it was at 12 when we talk about the interest rate, when we talk about the monetary policy, it has been also increased. It has gone up at 13.25 now from 12.75, another addition of 0.5. Then it says a massive overhaul is required across the entire value chain in terms of pricing, governance, management of circular debt and handling mechanism of IPPs. I think that is something very, very important. Then he says livestock maintained growth momentum from last year and ultimately pushed agriculture sector's overall growth marginally into positive trajectory. The services sector lost some of its growth momentum from last year, registering a growth of 4.7% during fiscal year 19 as compared to 6.2% in fiscal year 18. Then it says to absorb the excess liquidity from the market and to keep overnight rates close to the policy rate, the State Bank of Pakistan had to conduct 52 OMOS, mop-ups only during the quarter. Then it says with stabilization policies in place and the economy moving along the reforms agenda, the country's macroeconomic indicators are expected to slowly revert to a stable trajectory. However, the real GDP growth is likely to remain contained. It further adds that the government is projecting the deficit to reduce further in fiscal year 20 on the back of an expected better export performance, containment of import payments and continued momentum in workers' remittances, primarily to control the imports, to increase the exports and to also depend on the workers' remittances. The downside risks persist in the wake of slowdown in the global economy attributed to escalated trade war between US and China and uncertainty in Europe. So primarily, these are the lines which we'll be picking up in our today's program and we'll be talking about it. Let me introduce you to our panelists. On my right is Dr. Idris Khwaja. He is the Dean, School of Management at University. Thank you very much, Faisal, for taking out your time and being here in our program. And we also have with us Faisal Fateh. He needs no introduction. He's a senior stock market expert. Thank you very much, Faisal. And we have with us Dr. Farida Faisal, educationist and also an economist. Thank you very much, ma'am. So, sir, whatever has been said, I mean, these were the primarily how many? 12 points. And I think 10 of them were not very good for the economy, sir. Primarily what I'm thinking is that except for a few, rest seems to be pretty much under pressure. So your take.
So the main issue seems to be the twin deficits, that is the fiscal deficit and then the current account deficit. So the fiscal deficit is high because of all the expenditures. There has been a slowdown in economy because of lower expenditures on PSDP. There is a slowdown on CPEC as well. And the slowdown of the government expenditures is partly because of lower tax revenues. And then on the external side, there is
slow growth as well. So obviously, when the overall market is shrinking,
so when the market is shrinking, the tax revenues are low. And then there is the exchange rate depreciation as well. So that depreciation is causing inflation, and then inflation is causing some slowdown as well. So these are the main factors. So the bottom line is, but what people are not thinking and what not linking it is that this has to do something with the accountability drive as well. Accountability drive is, for the moment, shrinking the economy, but in the long run, this is good for the economy. People say that...
Most of the people in Pakistan in particular, sir, do not believe in the long-term policies of the government that, you know, after 6 years we'll get this. People want immediate results. And currently, you talk to anyone, sir, people even from the PTI, to be very honest, they are practically not happy with the current performance of the government. I mean, they believe that the government is only after the accountability and they've forgotten the rest of the affairs. Unfortunately, this is what a common man is thinking at the moment, sir. From any class you want to, you want to pick that individual. Secondly, there is another important area, and that is about the immediate jerks which the nation has felt. So, for example, inflation. For example, availability, forget about the price, availability of the dollar. And a couple of other very uncertain facts. Look at the behavior of the stock market or otherwise. I mean, don't you think the current system is under a lot of pressure? And there seems to be a disconnect or maybe some sort of a trust deficit between the public, consumer or the people and the government and their policies.
No, if you look at the last 5 years, almost every economist was saying that the exchange rate is overvalued. The fact that we tried to maintain exchange rate at the level of 98 or around 100, we are paying the price for that. Had we gradually depreciated then, we would not have gone for a sudden devaluation now. So this is the price of not adjusting. If somebody is sick and is not taking medicine, then ultimately he may need, in the long run, he may need a surgery. So that's what's happening. The economy now needs a surgery because we had not taken the medicine at the right time. That was depreciation of rupee because our exports were not increasing in the last 5 years and our imports were higher. So the demand for dollars or the demand for foreign currency was greater than the supply. But we were not depreciating the currency. The fundamentals demanded that the exchange currency should have gone for a depreciation 5 years back. And this happened not just in the last scenario. If you go back to 2008, during the Musharraf era, we tried to maintain the exchange rate at the level of 60. And then when there was switchover of regime, the exchange rate suddenly depreciated to 77 or 78. There was something like 30% depreciation at that time. So it is not taking the right measures at the right time, which is the cause of the malaise.
I'll get back to this. So now talking about the capital market, the stock markets. Sure. A lot of people believed even at that time, sir, when the market was hovering around 53, 52, well, 50, let's put it this way, that there is this bubble, an artificial bubble. It's a bubble economy kind of statement. And it was supposed to correct itself. And it did correct.
Right.
Do you think that was the issue primarily, when the reason, where we have seen the market dipping, or you think there could be some other reason? For example, the other could be that the actual market forces, they have applied their law now.
Okay, look, again, stock markets, as I have talked about so much, they are movers based on the perceptions, on rumors, not on news, not on actual data, right? You're trying to project what will happen with the stock price going forward. Maybe a quarter, maybe a year, maybe 3 years, maybe 4 years. So the price movement in stock market is mostly based on perceptions, and most of the times it overreacts, sometimes it underreacts, sometimes it goes up, sometimes it goes down. Coming towards the bubble, yes, there was a bubble because you have to see the dynamics of stock market. There are very few investors. We don't have that large investor base. We have not that many companies into it. Manipulation comes into play. There's so many other factors. You don't have that many places to go and invest your money in Pakistan. There's real estate and stock market. What else do you have? Nothing. Mostly it's real estate. So yes, there was a bubble, and especially I would say the real value would be around 42,000, 43,000. It wasn't huge bubble. It wasn't like the real value is 42,000 and the stock market is high above, 80,000, something like that. But what happened was there was a perception that you are having good growth, your growth is improving, you might be touching 7% of the GDP.
The fundamentals are great.
Yeah,
That's what we
fundamentals were great.
normally hear, yeah.
And to be very honest, companies were doing good. The companies were, pharmaceutical was doing amazing, auto sector was doing amazing, agriculture maybe, not that much, but most of the your manufacturing sector was doing good.
Now, what has hit the automobile sector now? Primarily
Now
the
it
dollar
has-
and the price, because now we have heard that Honda, as
Right.
well as Indus Motors, Toyota, they have
Okay.
shut down their plants for at least, I
It-
think one for a week and the second one for 2
Yeah.
weeks, because they have ample cars in their stores, in their inventory. So,
Look, the basic issue which we see is transactions that are not happening in the economy. Right after this government came in, after the change of the guard, it happens. Unfortunately, it happens after every 5 years in our country. Right?
is it the fear factor?
It's if it is fear, it's fear of unknown. Right? When we talk about this state bank policy, we are looking from the, you can say, rear view mirror, what happened in the last 9 months. Right now, look forward, and there's nothing more to look forward to. There's not much of a silver lining in this policy. Right? You have done everything you could have done. You have increased the taxation, everything, but the fundamental, the structural issues are still there. Just imagine, like your LSM is decreasing. Now take example, since silver lining that service sector is
Forget
increasing.
about the large scale manufacturing, even the services,
They have
which
decreased,
contribute to almost 2/3 in your,
right?
in your
They have
GDP.
decreased, but they are still
Agriculture, I mean, you talk about sugarcane, almost 15-16% gone down. Your cotton,
cotton has gone
17-18%
down. Of course.
decline. So you can well imagine.
But the difference is right now your service sector is still at 5% to 4.8% growth, right? And your LSM is going negative. How you're going to manage that? Either it's going to be managed like services sector. Basically, it could be you can take it as consumption, right? So how you're going to manage that consumption? Either it's going to be import led because your own manufacturing is going down. So neither you're going to get any export surplus, neither you're going to get anything else that you can export or use on your own. That being said, your pharmaceutical had a worse quarter than last 1 decade. Okay, it's really bad for pharmaceutical, auto industry, as we already talked about it. If you talk about steel, if you talk about cement, so there is no rosy picture coming out of these last 9 months of review. And the issue which I see is, even after implying all these fiscal measures, monetary measures, everything, the structural issues are still there. Right? We are not seeing any silver lining towards those structural issues.
But they can't be sorted out in like 2, 3, 4 months, maybe 6 months. They will take time. And there is always another very important point, ma'am, and that is about the process of adoption and adoption both. I mean, unfortunately, for example, whenever there is a law imposed and strict measures are taken, for example, wear a seatbelt, people have started wearing seatbelt. Or for that matter, wear a safety helmet. That's important for you. Not because of the safety purposes, but because they might be stopped by the police and might be issued a challan or something. So that is the primary reason. That stick and carrot formula works side by side. But in this case, ma'am, I mean, what we have seen that, let's suppose, there was this strike in almost all the major cities in Pakistan by the retailers, primarily by all the business community.
Yeah.
And there was one demand that they don't want their, ID card to be
ID
used
card.
to determine about their transactions. Now, why not? Because practically speaking, if you can just get them into the main loop, they can practically give you at least 20 to 25% more.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the overall pie. And that is a way forward, ma'am. Why not to get yourself registered and be a good citizen? Because unfortunately, those practices are not adopted here, ma'am.
No, agreed. The complication here is that some of the demands are genuine. Some are simply that the business community, the traders in particular, they do not want to change their set ways of doing business. How to separate the two? Yes, at the moment they are more sticks than carrots. That needs to be rationalized. And I think that the policies in themselves are okay. I mean, yes, we need to increase our tax base. There is no other solution. But how? How
Ma'am,
you
you
do
were
it?
there in that
That is the
program when
problem.
the Prime Minister, in fact, addressed the
Yeah.
nation and he spoke and he tried
Yes,
to
I was
clear
there.
most of the issues. Even that day,
Yes.
if you remember, ma'am, the major idea was to make sure that people should be convinced and they should be actually a part of that tax net. You know how many people got themselves registered after the massive campaigns and everything? 1,37,000
True.
out of, forget about the total number. Is
I
it
mean,
justified?
that was, or we can see it as a good beginning. But at the same time, I think we need to know more cases where people did not register and were punished for not registering, maybe through a better mechanism of identifying the defaulters at this point in time. That would, and distinguishing them from those who pay their taxes and giving them more incentives. So at this point, again, I think that it's a very difficult task that the government is doing. Give them that much. And it's
It is
not
indeed.
easy. It is
Nobody's
not
denying
easy
that.
to change business practices. It takes time. So let us wait for another, give them another 6 months or so. When this whole reform process started, at that time we had predicted that it's going to take at least
Ma'am, let's
a
suppose
couple of
everything,
years
everything
for
remains
turnaround.
constant, everything moves
Yeah.
in a great fashion. Do you believe at some stage, let's say
Yes.
6 to 8 months from now,
Yeah.
do you believe that we'll feel that effect, ma'am, of good governance, of the right decision-making process, of placing the right man for the right job? I mean, I'm just giving you a scenario. Just create one and imagine things will be fine.
We will get used to the pain.
We'll get used to the pain. So things won't improve the way we want them to.
Listen, we are not living in an ideal world. If we were, then things would be different and our targets would be different. We want the best, but we don't want to suffer for it in general, you see. And the kind of reforms that are
So you
required
need to
are
deserve it
miracles.
first and then you will get it.
Yeah, I agree. But some important changes have taken place, and I think through programs like that, it is very important that we plead to the government again and again that now is the time to make the structural reform, as Faisal was saying. These are necessary. Improve the ease of doing business and the pain will reduce sharply. But it's tough to do that, you see. There are so many
Ma'am, most of the
lobbies
people who are
and-
from the working class, they do
Yeah.
not have any business or anything. They're actually feeling it now.
Yeah, yeah.
And most of them believe, and I'm talking about a lot of people from various social classes,
Yeah.
they believe that this inflation, I mean,
Yes.
when you talk about inflation, primarily you're talking about the general inflation, about the
Yes.
CPI, for example, about the food basket or otherwise. And then you're also talking about the utility bills. I mean, when you hear that these many rupees further added per unit into and eventually this is what
Actually,
is going
what
to
has
happen. Or, for example, electricity, or the natural gas we use, or the telephone, or, for example, you go and buy something from Khadi for that matter, additional tax, 16 or 14%.
I've paid that.
No, you see, this is what I'm saying. What exactly is
Then that
happening?
hurt.
Because indirect taxes, they are squeezing you. At the end of the day, the final consumer is suffering. Why? That's my question.
Actually, the thing, as an economist, I think that what's alarming is not inflation per se. If employment was going up at the same time, then it would have balanced itself out. What
You
we
don't
are
have any
experiencing
significant
is
economic
called
growth here.
stagflation. It's called stagflation, and that is a
The third quarterly
seriously
report
issue.
of this year
Yes,
is actually a very alarming report.
it is.
Correct,
No
ma'am?
doubt.
Because when you look at these digits, you would hold your head. You won't be very happy and smiling. Now, coming back to you, sir. As madam said, well, growth rate. Sir, when you're almost unable to achieve any proper target, whether you have kept it for agriculture or for large-scale manufacturing or for that matter, your services sector, which is huge, 2/3 of the total GDP. Forget about the gray area of economy, undocumented one, sir. Look at these digits. Now, you have further increased your interest rate, another 0.5%. That means that from 12.75 to 13.25, highest ever. Correct, sir, if I'm not wrong?
Highest in Asia.
Right, ma'am? And you expect a lot of people from the private sector to get money from the bank and use it. Now, sir, looking at the current growth rate and this interest rate, I mean, God knows what sort of a business you should be in to make this kind of money, A. And secondly, sir, how will you repay? And at the same time, if you look at the government borrowing, forget about the fiscal space now. That is again going up like this. So at some stage, do you think that they will lower the interest rate or they'll take it further up? How would they get it back to the market, right, sir? So these are the issues.
So eventually the interest rate would, it's a cycle, and eventually the interest rate would come down. But somehow the economists, other people, and typical economists make too much and rely too much on interest rates for stabilization, etc. But look at the structure of Pakistan economy. How many people are borrowing?
I agree, sir. No matter how much you take it up, it won't be able to control your inflation because there's so many other very strong indicators and players, I would say.
Because inflation is not driven primarily by monetary factors. Inflation, in fact, is being driven by fiscal factors. Because
demand and supply primarily.
Yeah, no, but how many people are borrowing? Does the informal sector borrows from, and the estimate of informal economy ranges from 40 to 90%. So does the informal sector borrow? Does the agriculture sector borrow? So they don't borrow. So whether the interest rate is 20% or whether the interest rate is 10%, it doesn't affect them. So the economists somehow tend to, and I somehow tend to make too much out of the interest rate. This monetary tools are not going to work.
It's more maybe applicable on the documented economy. That's the thing, right?
Yeah, but the documented economy is very small. So it's the fiscal thing. One, it is the fiscal expenditures, that is expenditures of the government that is driving the inflation, and then the inflation is imported inflation. Because we are importing fuel at a higher rate. So fuel enters into the cost of production. It has nothing to do with interest rates. And we are importing all necessities. We are importing mobile phones at a higher rate. So it enters into the cost of economy, cost of transactions. So we have to control these expenditures if we have to control inflation.
Expenditures, sir. There was this report which, in fact, gave a very alarming sort of an outlook. Around $5.5 to $6 billion worth of items, not talking about the textile machinery or anything, talking about the general items like butter, cheese, milk, fruit, the value-added products which we use in Pakistan, sir, in the form of dry fruit or anything. Can you imagine, sir? So that is a huge, but it doesn't mean that the government should just strictly even say that no more imports or impose such a tax bracket that, people would just feel awkward. And this is what is happening. Alternatives are not provided, sir. That's another reason.
So this again goes to...
I'll just give you one example. Automobile industry was doing great because nobody was there to put a check on the pricing, ma'am. Look at the price. This should have been around 1.4 to 1.5 million max, which is hitting around 4.2 billion at the moment, sir.
True.
So why? These are the questions. You need to get value for your money, sir, in any country of the world, right? This is your basic right. But over here, you're forced to buy and you don't have a choice. And this is very unfortunate. If the free market forces are applied and let them work their way, then let them work fully their way. Don't you agree, sir?
I agree, but free market...
Because a normal person won't understand that why Dar Sahab kept it under 100 per dollar. They say, oh, well, this is their mismanagement that it went up to 160 or whatever.
No. But how he kept it under 100? Because we had the dollars and...
Within 6 months, he in fact offloaded $3 billion.
Yes.
6 months to Dar. This is what Miftah Sahab has said on air.
But to offload $3 billion into the market, you need to have $3 billion with the state bank. So the government doesn't have that kind of money. So the government cannot intervene. Basically, I think the problem is that we are taking something like this, that the economy and rest of the non-economic factors can work in isolation. So it's said that the government should focus on the economy, the government should focus on governance. No. Let's suppose that a thing has to be priced at $1,000, and because of unknown reasons, somehow for corruption or whatever, it is imported for $1,500, a government expenditure, then $500 more are flowing out of Pakistan, out of the country, which should not have flown out. So that increases the demand for foreign currency. When the demand for foreign currency increases because of this kind of corruption or for money laundering, then there is pressure on the exchange rate. Then we are basically importing inflation, and then this is going all the way down to the economy and down to the consumers. If the tax machinery is not collecting taxes, then what the government has to do is that the government has to, if the tax machinery is not collecting, for example, income tax directly from the people, then the government has to impose indirect taxes, like which are regressive in nature, for example, taxes on mobile phones. One of the reasons why
On everything, sir.
On everything.
On
On everything. So the government has to impose indirect taxes because of the inability of the tax machinery to collect direct taxes. So the corruption flows everywhere into the economy. So if we somehow tackle corruption first and foremost, we would be settling our economic issues then.
Sorry, when I said 18%, when we were talking about the decline, that's actually 19.4% and 17.5% for sugarcane. These are the exact figures. So it wasn't 14 and 16, they were 19.4 and 7.5. I'm just giving you like almost 1/5. Now, talking about the silver lining and the livestock segment, I mean, I think we haven't done much. It's the nature. And I think they've also gotten the idea of population explosion. So they're learning something at least from Pakistan. Now the interesting part is, sir, agriculture has gone down. Your livestock segment has shown a normal growth. There isn't much. But looking at your services, it has gone down from 6.2 to 4.7, right? So you're down from there as well. Large scale manufacturing, again, has shown a negative growth, sir. The more pressure you'll put on the economy, on the output basically, sir, then you're talking about missing out on almost all the targets you have set. And especially during the current time period where I believe there's a lot of trust deficit. People might like to, but still they are not sure what will happen. As you earlier said, we need to look into the rearview mirror to see, okay, this is what happened last time, so this might happen again.
Right.
So that trust deficit, Faisal, you were also connected in the stock market. You talk to people, you meet people from the different chambers and all. What sort of a mindset is there, sir? I mean, are they ready to go and support the Imran Khan's ideology, or there seems to be a disconnect there as well?
I think first of all, everybody is, look, we are all human beings. First is it my interest, and then, the larger interest comes in. And wherever countries have grown is where, self-interest has been merged into a national interest. Where, as Adam Smith said, if your self-interest is working in the direction of what your national interest is, both parties will be, beneficial, and that would happen. That being said, there's a lot of a disconnect between what trade bodies or what chambers or what these people feel and what government is projecting for, you can say, for common person. And let aside these trade bodies and traders, let's even talk about the elite businessmen, the ones who run the large-scale manufacturing, your exporters. In any society, these elites, they are heavyweights. They contribute more towards exports. They contribute more towards taxation as well. When we talk about these elites, they are not somebody who don't understand the reality. They are not somebody who doesn't understand, doesn't have a business sense. They are educated, even if it is not formal education. They have a lot of good sense about business. They have a lot of good sense about economy. They understand business cycles. They don't have knee-jerk reactions to an adverse business cycle. But even they are not being communicated or not being, kept in the loop, like what is going to happen 6 months, 7 months, 1 year, 2 years down the road. You talk about inflation. Today, Raza Bakar, what he said and what I could deduce from his thinking was, we might be looking at inflation of 11 or 12% down the road, right? And 13.25% might not be the end of it. So that being said, as even if I don't take loan, maybe I need some money for my working capital, but let's say even if I am from the informal sector, the informal sector also works under the umbrella of formal sector. Right? Even if it is informal sector, you cannot expect somebody who sells samosas to start paying taxes tomorrow. But you should not expect him. He will be exporting samosas. But whatever.
But what I'm saying is, if that person, whoever is selling samosas,
right,
is his regular sales is over 50,000 rupees a day.
Okay.
Practically, and there are many.
Okay, of course.
Right, sir?
Right.
Why shouldn't he pay taxes?
I'm not saying he shouldn't pay taxes, but you have to look overall. You have to look your previous experiments you have done. You have to get some results out of that.
You need to put a check somewhere, sir.
Do you know that your deposit ratios, once Ishaq Dar Saab put 0.01% on withdrawal of money above 50,000 was
On 100,000 for a taxpayer, it used to be 600 rupees. For
from
a
that
non-taxpayer,
day.
it was 300.
From that day till today, even once you have raised your interest rate to 13%, you will be shocked to know there is not any substantial growth in deposits with the banks. You have to learn with your previous experiments. I'm not saying
What
he
works
should
well
not.
and what doesn't?
You have to come up maybe some innovative way, or you have to try something else, because these economic measures that we keep on taking, which we keep on borrowing from IMF, from international lenders, we keep on bringing them up back to Pakistan, we keep on trying that. We have tried it for last, 18 times from IMF. It didn't work. And if anybody is expecting that this would work this time as well, at least I am not.
Another point, ma'am. Now coming to you, since we were talking about the tax collection,
Yeah.
another very interesting figure. I'm talking about the fiscal year, third fiscal year. That's July to March. All right.
Third quarter.
And yeah, 2018.
Okay.
It says that the growth rate. I'm talking
Yeah.
about the FBR's tax
Collection.
It
Yeah.
grew by 16.2% last year during the same period. During the same period, it was reported at 2.8% growth. 16.2 versus 2.8. Last fiscal year means when Nawaz Sharif was in his, not Nawaz Sharif, means KPMLN was in the government.
Yeah.
Why?
Okay. So actually, it's a good
So
thing
whatever
that it's
campaign
growth.
they are having is not working well.
It's not that simple, Faisal.
That's what I'm saying.
It's quite complicated actually, because the economy was consumption-led and it was unsustainable to deal it with that way. There were a lot of imports. On the imports you were charging taxes. But remember, what you need to look at is that what was the tax base? It was 1%, right? Which these people inherited, who were paying the direct taxes. So it was on the back of indirect taxations, that you could see that kind of inflated growth rate. So that has to change, because that's a kind of a regressive regime. You've talked about, I think there's two more important components which need to be discussed, and those are investment and remittances.
Remittances have increased slowly.
Yes.
But
so
surely.
That's
But when you talk about the other,
so that's a good sign. Investment, yes. Now
lowest
that
in the
is-
last 4 years.
yeah.
That's what this document tells
yes.
me.
So that hasn't been again a cause of serious concern. And
That's
if you
the catalyst
really
for economic
want
growth.
to come out of this economic, pit or quagmire, the only way is through investments. And we kept hearing that different countries are going to invest this much in Pakistan. Recently, Qatar is going to invest, etc. So there are definitely glitches there which need to be addressed. The investment team of the Prime Minister, so finance and investment are separate, you see. So that team needs to be reinforced, and it needs to do its work more stringently. You really need reform in that area, and over there you need to look at what are the basic reasons that investment is not picking up. Pakistan is an attractive destination.
That's what we say, ma'am. But the point is, when you look at it from a different perspective, from the perspective of a foreign investor,
Yeah.
he has got multiple choices.
True.
You have offered all you could have. I mean, sovereign guarantee in dollars, right?
No.
For that investor, what else would he require? You are actually ensuring him that you can take away about 30% profit every year. Correct, ma'am? You are ensuring everything. Still, there is a problem.
Yeah, and
that is about law and order. That is about the uncertainty prevailing in the market, unfortunately.
It's more than that, actually. These are the structural
When
issues.
you need to-
the ease of doing business. You need one window
Multiple
operations.
factors. And this is
But-
not
but it is
wh-
not
what I'm saying.
impossible to address
This is
them.
your World Economic Forum's study and their research, which gives us the data. And you stand somewhere, I don't know,
Yeah,
after 150 or
unfortunately,
something.
over there also we see that we have not performed according to our potential, but there is a lot, and there are those, you see, a lot of interest has been shown, and it is not impossible to address the concerns of these larger investments. You get one major investment in the country, and that, because as Faisal was pointing out, it's basically sentiment. So you have one good working project in your country. If nothing else, you just deal with this Ricodic case somehow, bring back the company
Somehow
back.
pay another additional
whatever.
dime for dollars. I mean,
Solve
whatever you have
it.
gotten from
I know, but it
the
has to
Monetary
resolve.
Fund, IMF, you are practically giving all that money away to
No,
that.
but
Finally,
you
you lost another. We haven't won anything. We were supposed to pay about 16, 14 or 16, ended up around 6, 5.97 if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, it was
So-
handled poorly, but that doesn't mean that we don't have the
Go
gold
after the
reserve.
former Chief Justice.
But that's not
Chaudhary
gonna
sir,
solve the
somebody
thing.
should be held accountable. Why should Pakistan
Listen,
pay
at
$6
the
billion
moment, Faisal-
of their wrongdoings, of their stupidities, I
No,
would say?
listen, I was trying to make a point here that the gold still remains there, and it can be, mined.
Man,
So
God
we
knows
have
that
the
we have got a
gold.
billion carat diamonds hidden somewhere in the
Yeah,
mountain
no,
ranges.
but this is the one for which the feasibility study has been done, and this, one or two good projects. That's all you need, really.
People
to
say
restore
this
the
Ricodic is
confidence.
worth around $1 trillion. Correct,
Yeah.
sir? Maybe 10, maybe 5. Let's suppose, whatever. What I'm saying is, ma'am, that somebody needs to take that out and somebody needs to have a proper documentation. Somebody needs to look after the concerns of
Yeah.
Pakistan, please, for God's sake. Don't give it to China on 99.99999% and whatever. It's your thing. Use it and spend it wisely. But the problem is, again, I mean, it's the attitude of the people, unfortunately. That seems to be the problem from top to bottom.
Every problem in this world has a resolution. Resolve this problem, get a few large investors, look at their issues, what they are, and trust me, once it starts coming, I believe that the conditions in Pakistan are not that bad. It will pick up. It is just sentiment. You need few indicators in the right direction, and we can read the situation can improve.
Well, let's see, sir. But now, please, Wesley.
I would just like to add, with your permission, sir.
Sure.
All right, look, you have to decide if you want yourself to be an export-oriented country. Like what usually happens is, you slam so much import duties on imports, and you start creating demand inside the country, and that is when you can expect other like foreign investment to come into Pakistan. You cannot keep on doing that to have a policy today, then you keep on changing that policy tomorrow. Once you want to subsidize imports, then all of a sudden you realize, oh, we have done it such a bad thing, now we are going to slam all our brakes on the imports. You have to come up with a policy. You want foreign
Exactly.
investment to come in.
There has to be some sort of a consistency, sir.
Look, anybody who invests in a business world, he invests because he wants to make money. Rest aside, whatever the risks are, whether it is law and order, it's a risk. I can take that if
you'll
the
make more
payout,
money.
if the payout is good, right? Chinese, even Americans, Europeans, they go into African countries having far worse law and order situation, having far worse corruption, having far worse bureaucratic structure. They still go there. They still mine there. They still get stuff out of there. You can look at the model, what Japanese have done. You can look at consumption, but you have to decide. If you want people to come into your country, you want them to bring a foreign direct investment you're talking about, What you have to do is simply increase your trade barriers of imports. You have to start generating your local demand. You have enough population to start doing that demand. It is because of that population that Lotte is here, that Nestle is here. They sell stuff to your local population.
Make a lot of money.
But you have
$1
to
billion
come up.
plus.
You have to come
The
up.
takeaway.
You have to come up with something, and this is the plan. And no matter whatever the government will come, this is what you're gonna stick with.
Before we close the show, just one example to share. The government announced that in Islamabad, nobody is supposed to give any product, any good in a plastic shopping bag, correct?
Yeah.
Couldn't impose those in Islamabad where people are educated, right, sir? Forget about the rest. Just instead of a plastic bag, use a paper bag or take your own bag along with you. Couldn't do so. And we talk about climate change and we talk about global warming. I was just reading an article and it said that, last year 22 billion slippers, plastic slippers were manufactured. 22 billion, right, sir? For almost 8 billion people. That's a good business. That reminded me of China and introducing that business in Africa. But interestingly, another 30 years from now, 2050, the total weight of plastic which we would have thrown by that time in the oceans would weigh more than the actual living beings in the sea. Forget about us, we are even killing them, poor creatures. But anyways, sir, thank you very much. This was a pleasure. Thank you very much, ma'am. And that's all we have for this. I'll see you tomorrow. Till then, you take good care. Khuda Hafiz.